Not surprised that they're thriving under your leadership. And we are officially live on Facebook. Welcome everybody to the Not Your Average Investor Show. I am your host, Pablo Gonzalez. My co-host as always, Gregg Cohen. Say hello, Gregg.
Everybody, good to be here.
And today we have a amazing guest that Gregg and I this morning were just geeking out about the opportunity to be back in his presence. He has been around the country in some of the most impactful markets in the United States. And now we get him in Jacksonville, leading the future, leading change here. Somebody who, Nat, you know, being in a room with you, it's like a regal presence because you're so well-spoken, you're so qualified, you have this unbelievable resume. So thank you, Nat Ford, CEO of the Jacksonville Transportation Authority. Welcome, Nat.
All right. Thank you, Pablo. And it's great to be back with you guys.
Awesome. We're honored to have you. So we were just talking, right? Last time we were all in the same room. I remember y'all had to, you know, push back like 15 minutes because you were going to this like coronavirus briefing that at the time felt so abstract. And now
and it's here. It's here. And this is our new normal, so to speak. So, but we pray for the best in this case, but, we do have to move things forward, and hopefully this will be over at some point and we can get back to thriving.
Yeah, definitely. Well, can you give us a little, a little peek behind the curtain of how you've adapted throughout this and how your role has evolved and, you know, really the highlighting of importance of having these like resilient corridors that we really, really need. If you could just touch on that.
Exactly. And I think a lot of us have learned, you know, when we talk about first responders or essential personnel, they come in all shapes, form, and fashion. And, if you look at the JTA, the sheer fact that, our transit operators, our bus operators have worked through this entire pandemic. They did not have the ability to turn off and work from home and quarantine and things of that nature. And so I have to start off first with thanking them for the work that they have done and continue to do. And in a lot of cases, they're moving individuals to getting them to work, getting them to hospital, moving hospital workers, moving folks that support a lot of the industries here in terms of food and beverage and a whole host of other essential services, grocery stores, stocking those shelves and things of that nature. And, our operators have been out there severely impacted in terms of our ridership. So our ridership dropped by about 60%. Obviously, no one wants to be on a bus until this is, really resolved itself either through a vaccine or some other measures in terms of dealing with this pandemic. But we are still carrying about 13,000 people every day, primarily essential workers, folks that do essential duties to support our community. For our operators, we've provided them with personal protective equipment, masks. We were fortunate. Literally about almost a year or so ago, we deployed shields in the driver's compartment for our bus operators. And really it was related to ensuring their safety from anybody taking some type of, trying to harm them while they're performing their duties, an irate passenger or something like that. And it has served us well because those shields are also protecting our operators from, droplets and things of that nature. So they have hand sanitizer, our PPE in terms of the form of masks. We did not suffer through those types of tools, that type of protective equipment. Our administrative employees, though, fortunately with the building of the Regional Transportation Center in La Villa, the JRTC, we designed in a great deal of technology to support this new facility. So it would be here for decades to come in terms of new technologies. We were able to leverage that technology for our administrative staff so they could work from home, and we have not missed a beat in terms of just all of the back office activity, the the frontline work that our drivers are doing. Things have gone very well in light of the pandemic. Financially, sales tax, gas tax, and our fare revenue has significantly declined. We've been successful to get funding from the CARES Act. So a lot of folks have heard about the CARES Act, which is really supplementing this economic downturn. We received about 2 weeks ago our first grant award of $15.2 million. It is filling that gap in terms of the financial impact that we have. However, the total of $42 million over the next couple of weeks, when we receive that, we're actually going to use that funding to help us into next year's budget. But I would not be accurate, or I wouldn't be totally transparent in that we are seeing, or at least our financial projections are at least 2 or maybe 2 years or up to 3 years before we're back to normal. So we're going to see some difficult, challenging time in terms of our financial health. We're very optimistic here. We're looking at other opportunities to keep the system up and running.
Nat, I appreciate you being so transparent there. Those were a number of questions that I think a lot of our listeners have. I have those questions, so really appreciate you sharing there. Let's focus more on the positive to start out with here, because I don't know, a lot of our listeners are actually from different parts of the country, and some of these projects that you headed up are so transformative for the growth of Jacksonville, specifically downtown. You mentioned the Jacksonville Regional Transportation Center.
Yes.
And could you tell everybody here what that is exactly, and why that is so important for the future of your projects and the future of downtown?
Clearly, it's a game changer. You look at the La Villa community, which was once a thriving community here in Jacksonville, but fell on hard times. And a city like Jacksonville, which is emerging and is really the heartbeat for Northeast Florida. And the growth that is going to occur outside of the city of Jacksonville in our suburban communities, with all of the jobs here in downtown Jacksonville, or the vast majority of them, it was critical that we had a regional transportation center where public transportation could converge in one facility, whether you live in Baker County, Clay County, Nassau County, and you're commuting into Duval, you'd be able to make that trip through public transportation. It's regional also, it's inner city also, in that we developed the Greyhound, Megabus, and Red Coach facility, which is right across the street. So that was phase one. And then you have this regional transportation center that pulls together all of our commuter bus services. So we have commuter bus service right now to Nassau County. In a couple of weeks, we were waiting on the pandemic to kind of settle out a little bit, but in a couple of weeks, you'll have commuter bus service from Clay County, and you will have commuter bus service from St. Johns County, as well as Baker County. And you will be able to commute into downtown Jacksonville, connect at the Regional Transportation Center, then use our Skyway to distribute to get to downtown office buildings. And, that's the next big project for us, which is the ultimate urban circulator that we're developing, and it will connect with the Regional Transportation Center. So this is a game changer. So connectivity to Atlanta, Orlando, Tallahassee, connections to our collar counties in terms of suburbanites, and then to be able to distribute them quickly with our Skyway, which will then be converted to autonomous vehicle system.
That's where I would love to go next. I think this is just about the coolest project, and I would be willing to bet the majority of the people in our network here, even on the show, are not aware of the U2C, the Ultimate Urban Circulator.
Oh, yes.
And I love the idea. I've been trying to spend some time getting inside your head, Nat, a little bit. I've been trying to understand how all of these pieces link together. And so starting with the JRTC, the Jacksonville Regional Transportation Center, getting the bus system there and getting access from all of these surrounding communities there is really important. And then that word intermodal, right? That means multiple modes of transportation. So can you guide us on what the Ultimate Urban Circulator is, and then what that step is, and maybe even steps? I know there's 4 phases to it. Could you kind of paint a picture of what this is going to mean and how cool this is?
Exactly. And, and then I'll circle back and also share with you this autonomous vehicle technology, driverless vehicle technology, that we started this journey about 3 years ago as a solution to deal with our aging Skyway people mover monorail system here in downtown Jacksonville, and how it has been leveraged as it relates to dealing with COVID-19. So please don't let me forget to touch upon that, because it's really something that's gotten us a lot of national attention. But the Skyway that we currently enjoy here, the automatic automated people mover. At 30 years of age, it's reached its useful life. It's 2.5 miles of operation, aerial, monorail here in downtown Jacksonville. And it's been here for 30 years. It never got fully built out. Administrations change over time, and it really got stunted at 2.5 miles. And we really had to make a tough decision whether to continue to operate it, and how would you operate this obsolete technology? It's 30 years old. Do we expand it? How do you modernize it? We went through a very exhaustive, but I think effective process that involved a lot of outside stakeholders to determine, with the redevelopment that's occurring down in Jacksonville, planned and actual occurring right now, that there needed to be some conveyance to move people efficiently in downtown Jacksonville. With that being said, the Ultimate Urban Circulator Project came along, the U2C. We are actually a road building agency along with a transit system. We looked at converting, and we decided to convert the aerial monorail to a roadway at elevation. 2.5 miles of roadway above the traffic here in downtown Jacksonville. Use autonomous driverless vehicles. The monorails actually operate without a driver, but so you can kind of see the dots connecting between the road building element and let's build a road up there. Now, what type of vehicle? Let's get autonomous vehicles because they're driverless, and then take it a step further to build out an 8-mile system that will use a series of ramps or elevators. We're still doing some of the final design on that, to take these vehicles to street level and then expand it into the downtown neighborhoods. And this project has gotten a great deal of federal attention. We got a US DOT build grant to help fund the first phase. Bay Street Innovation Corridor, which will connect our downtown core to the TIAA Bankfield Stadium complex and the sports complex where the Jaguars play. Then the aerial structure conversion, converting from the monorail to the roadway, and then a series of expansions into adjoining neighborhoods through the series of, for lack of a better description, a road ramp, a highway ramp that we'll build to take it down to street level and then operate it in mixed traffic into these neighborhoods. It's the interesting thing, this Monday, we actually released the RFQ, the request for qualifications for the first phase, the Bay Street Innovation Corridor phase. It's fully funded. So we're moving forward in spite of some of these other issues. We have a project that's fully funded and ready to go. First autonomous transit network in the nation when we complete it in about 3 years.
That's incredible. Nat, reading up on this and seeing everything that's been happening at JTA throughout this time in the last couple of months, there've been some headlines, right? First, I want you to talk about the autonomous driving vehicles, of how you deployed that for COVID first.
Right. So, obviously to understand this technology and know what we were going to deploy, in terms of this system, we had to test out various different vehicles. And there's about a half dozen to a dozen different autonomous vehicle manufacturers. We set up a test track here in Jacksonville 2 years ago, and we've been testing different manufacturers' vehicles and actually contracting with them so we could lease those vehicles and test them out. And when COVID-19 hit in earnest, one of the firms that we've been working with, Beep, and they were operating in Orlando, doing some testing in Orlando, and we were testing their Navia vehicle through Beep here in Jacksonville. We reached out to them, and the idea was, how can we take this technology and deploy it to help with medical healthcare issues related to COVID? We had already spoken to Mayo Clinic along with some other large employers here in Jacksonville to see how we could deploy, testing out the ad-grade system. How could we start deploying on either a hospital campus or a college campus autonomous vehicles? Again, part of our test and learn strategy. And we had already started discussing a deployment at Mayo Clinic on their campus. They were setting up a drive-through testing facility for COVID-19 in one of their outermost parking lots, which was, accessible for automobiles. People could drive up. However, you had to transport those samples from the testing facility to their laboratory for final testing. And that's where we stepped in with 4 vehicles in partnership with Beep, Navia, and the Mayo Clinic to use autonomous vehicles operating in level 4 autonomy. That's with no attendant, all right? Picking up the samples, so the health technicians do, aggregate the test sample specimens. They place it on the vehicle. The vehicle then operates in level 4 autonomy to their laboratory. Technician picks it up off of that vehicle and goes in the lab for the testing. And we're learning from it. They are learning from it. And more importantly, it is lessening the burden on Mayo Clinic in terms of manpower to do this this testing. And so it's been a win-win. We've gotten a national media attention for this deployment, but I'm proud of my team. I've got an exceptional, creative, courageous team of individuals who are willing to take smart risks and do something like this. And so when the proposal came up, I said, go with it, run with it, and we're there.
This is really incredible. And I just kind of want to get more perspective on how much of a leader Jacksonville is in the autonomous vehicle game compared to other places in the country. I feel like that is just an unrealized nugget right there. Could you set the stage for how we compare to other parts of the country and maybe why we've been able to take such gains and leaps, whereas it's more difficult for other parts of the country?
There's a number of factors. As you know, I led the San Francisco system. I led the MARTA system. I started my career in New York. And I think Jacksonville, the size of our city, where we are on our trajectory in terms of growth and development and things of that nature, we are an emerging city. And as an emerging city, I think that also my being here as the CEO of the JTA was strategic. And I think from our elected officials to our business leaders, we are ready to take that next leap in terms of developing this community in this city. And it's going to need a robust public transportation system to be part of that. And I think just the environment that is created from a business standpoint to allow prudent business, strategic business decisions to be made to support the future of Jacksonville, I think that's where we get the wide bandwidth as a governmental entity or as the JTA to operate more like like a business and look strategically in terms of investments. And I've been blessed or fortunate to have a board of directors and elected officials that have been very supportive of us making prudent, reasonable investments in infrastructure, both conventional as well as forward-thinking technologies like autonomous vehicles. And if you look at healthcare, you look at education, and you look at economic vitality, transportation is going to be key to that. And so I've been, like I said, my team is very fortunate. I'm very fortunate that we're working in a city like Jacksonville with that kind of a mindset.
When you talk about education and economic vitality, this autonomous driving testing ground ecosystem that you are completely enabling, I see it as a huge economic driver for attracting institutions that now need to run their study programs and get the best minds that are working on autonomous vehicles here locally, that then bring the best students that then become the best candidates to hire. Right? Like, are you
laid it out? It's all about attracting the best talent here to Jacksonville and create an economic engine. This project basically places the Jacksonville community on the map in terms of we're not your old sleepy Jacksonville. We are on the cutting edge in terms of moving technology forward. And so, for example, as I mentioned, we had the partnership with Mayo. But we have also been in discussions with FSCJ, and I just signed an MOU with FSCJ, our Florida State College at Jacksonville, to now deploy autonomous vehicles on their campus. My staff, who are very competent as it relates to this autonomous vehicle technology, is now developing a curriculum to start teaching their students everything about automation and autonomous vehicles and these smart technologies and building that curriculum. Also, part of that MOU is at their Cecil Field facility. It will now be a much larger test facility for the JTA and autonomous vehicles. So, just the partnership with Mayo and Health, the partnership with FSCJ in terms of education, and frankly, creating the pipeline of talent that I will need to support these vehicles, as well as any other automation activities here in Jacksonville for some of our private sector business partners. So, It's really exciting time to be in this community, and again, worked around the country, but I would dare say having the opportunity to be this creative would be much more difficult in other communities.
I bet.
We're happy to have you, my friend. Well, I know that our time with you is pretty short, so I'm sure we'll make sure that we have time if there are any questions here. But could you give us just an idea of the project? I know you mentioned the first phase is fully funded.
Yes.
Congratulations for doing that. That is incredible. Could you lay out maybe, I don't know if you have set deadlines at this point yet, but I've heard that the RFP is the next stage, and that will happen in, I believe, September.
Right.
Could you
That's right.
lay that out? Just maybe the first phase, and then maybe some rough ideas of when you see this fully being executed.
Right. So first phase is the Bay Street Innovation Corridor. That's at grade. We've been able to work through with Florida DOT and City of Jacksonville, the actual lanes that the vehicles will be operating. Total of 15 vehicles that'll operate from our downtown core to the stadium facility. We've been working with the Jaguars, who are proposing development on Lot J, right in the parking lot there, to create this sports complex, and our vehicles will actually operate into the sports complex. And frankly, they want it right at their front door at the stadium, so people will be able to park in one of the downtown lots and then be able to ride our autonomous vehicles right to damn near to their seat in the stadium. And so we're really excited about that. And then the next phase, like I said, is the conversion of the aerial structure. We see that being just as challenging from a civil construction standpoint, if not more challenging. So autonomous vehicles operating at street level, you just need to make sure you have either a dedicated lane or the signal systems in that corridor, the fiber optics to support the communication systems, the actual command and control center, so we'll be able to see vehicles, see inside them, control them if we need to intercede. That phase is rather straightforward, and we expect to have that phase up in about 3 years. More complex in some ways, not technologically wise, but civil wise, is converting this monorail with a very large beam in the middle of this aerial structure, converting it back to a roadway. The first few phases of the Skyway was actually a roadway. And so we kind of had to go back in history, and that's where that idea and concept came through. Why not go back to a roadway and then have the freedom and be vehicle agnostic to select any vehicle, or any vehicle that comes in the future, you'd be able to utilize that aerial structure and it could be multi-purpose. We think that 2.5 mile conversion of the aerial structure is going to be 30-year aerial structure will be a bit of a challenge. But the funding and identifying that process will probably be a public-private partnership where we would bring in the private sector, firm financing, engineering, design, operate, maintain kind of structure. So this system probably will be something we contract out in partnership in terms of its operation. It needs to tie to the grade section. We're doing phase 1 first, and then phase 3 and 4 will be the extensions into the neighborhoods, and those will be all at grade. That's probably 5 to 7 years out. And full build out with the extensions, total system build out about 10 years. So you'll see vehicles up and running in about 2.5, 3 years. And then you'll see conversion and a lot of construction on the other segments. And that's concurrently about 5 to 7 years to get that done.
Exciting stuff.
Oh,
epic.
Yeah, well, it's definitely something that I am enjoying kind of working on, because I've been in this industry approaching 40 years. And I've said this numerous times. This is the one project that has gotten me overly excited. So.
Nat, you've been in this business for 40 years. When did you start being the CEO of a transportation authority? When you were like 10?
No, the CEO stuff started in about 20 years ago. But prior to that, I had about 15 years that, I worked in the trenches. And it started out with New York City Transit System and worked at BART in the Bay Area for a few years. And then Atlanta right after the Olympics, San Francisco after that, and now Jacksonville. And I've been here for 8 years. And again, had the opportunity, not just this project, but to do some really creative outside of the box thinking on the system, building a regional transportation center, the U2C. We've been in a growth mode and expansion mode, and it's great to be at the helm of this organization.
Nat, I really want to be respectful of your time. Do you need to go right at 1 o'clock?
No, I think I'm good. I'm going to take a look here at my calendar. I think I've got a couple of minutes.
Okay. We really wanted to touch on transit-oriented development. I know you just landed this big grant, right? Was that the build grant? Is that part of the build grant that you just mentioned, or is
so
this
the
a different
build
grant?
was related to the U2C, but
Okay.
the U2C, right after we received the grant from DOT for the Bay Street Innovation Corridor, right after that grant, we received another grant for about $1 million from USDOT to look at transit-oriented development in and around the stations that we were proposing for the overall U2C project. Not just the Bay Street Innovation Corridor, but the full 10-mile system with the extensions into the neighborhoods. And so then we received a grant from USDOT to study TOD around where those stations and nodes were going to be created. The recent grant that we received about a week or so ago for $962,000, I think the exact number is about somewhere in that range. That grant is to study development around our Green Line First Coast Flyer BRT system. So we have the branded bus rapid transit network. When fully built out, it'll be 57 miles, the largest bus rapid transit network in Southeast. Right now, with the 3 lines we have, it is the largest. And we have one last line we're building, and it'll be up and running next year to connect to Orange Park Mall from the Jacksonville Regional Transportation Center to the Orange Park Mall in Clay County. Major investment. I think it's a $34 million project that we're investing in. The grant that we're receiving is for development TOD along the Green Line, which was the first line that we built. That runs up Lem Turner from the Jacksonville Regional Transportation Center all the way to Armsdale Park and Ride, one of our park and rides at the northernmost border of Duval County. And so we're really, we've been building and growing here at a rapid pace. And the federal government has been a fantastic partner for the JTA. Frankly, the innovation on the Bay Street Innovation Corridor, building the largest bus rapid transit network, and then giving us grant money to study the development that needs to occur in and around this transit infrastructure that they have funded.
Can you give us a little bit of just what is transit-oriented development, right? We have a bunch of real estate investors in here. How does development work in transit-oriented development?
Well, particularly in a community like Jacksonville, it's critical. So when you look at a New York or a San Francisco, those communities are already built out. And so transit really serves the pure function of moving large numbers of people. Here in Jacksonville, based on our development patterns and our large footprint in terms of 860 square miles, folks have been able to sprawl out and live in almost every corner of our community. To make sure that from an efficiency standpoint of the transit system, it's critical that we create density in and around these transit investments. So whether it's U2C, First Coast Flyer, or existing bus service that we provide, transit-oriented development and these grants will allow us to do the planning and create the environment that will entice developers to build in and around our transit infrastructure. It takes a lot of pressure off of the road network, reduces the amount of parking that's necessary, and folks have, in the case of First Coast Flyer, there's a bus every 10 minutes. So you have high frequency, high quality service in terms of BRT. You have branded buses like our First Coast Flyer, so they look different than the rest of our buses. You also have real-time passenger information at each of those stops. So it's not a bus stop. It's like a mini station, that you would, that has more permanency. And frankly, because we received the grants, technically it's got to be there for nearly 50 years. You can't move that infrastructure because of the federal investment in that. And so the idea is to leverage that, create the density, make a live, work, play community in around that transit node that is high quality transportation.
For a developer like a JWB, are there specific incentives for transit-oriented development that work along with this?
Exactly. So there are incentives, and that's part of these studies also. It will, when we finish doing this, and we have a number of parcels that we're doing as the JTA without these studies that are just, smart ones, Gulf Air, Kings Avenue Garage, in and around our regional transportation center. We own parcels that we have banked over time right around the JRTC. In terms of the incentives, we work with the city of Jacksonville. We work with the state of Florida, and there are incentives for building in and around empowerment zones and in and around transportation hubs like our own. Also, I think from a developer's perspective, a lot of the parking infrastructure, garages and things of that nature, from a city policy standpoint, relaxing some of those requirements to build X amount of parking to match up with the square footage of an apartment. And so, it gives you the opportunity to relax some of that capital investment or reduce that capital investment and put more of that into the actual living space or the actual retail space or office space you're building.
That is so exciting. Keep us posted on that, Nat. We're certainly interested there. And the great thing, just to mention for all of our investors who are across the nation, might not know the specific areas that Nat's speaking of. Everything he just noted there, as far as the places where we have stops right now, or where we're thinking about using this grants for transit-oriented development, they're right in the neighborhoods that JWB invests in. Right there, everywhere he talked about. And it's a big part of not just why they're great neighborhoods now, but the infrastructure is there for continued growth in the future.
Exactly. And so I do have some questions that are popping up, and I would like to get to them.
Please, by all means. I was going to moderate those for you, Nat. Real quick, if you're a developer that has an idea for those parcels, the things that JTA sits on, is there an avenue to collaborate on that type of stuff?
Interesting enough, you don't have to wait for us to do an RFP. I mean, in some cases, we have advertised and marketed some of these parcels, but we're finding quite often we're getting unsolicited proposals. And so there, in terms of what needs to be developed there, we rely on the private sector, and we would rely on them even in an RFP process. Tell us what is, we have our minds set on, and these planning studies will help us, but we may have our minds set on what needs to be developed, but we're open to other ideas and unsolicited proposals. And right now we're actually considering a few that we've received around some of these parcels. And a lot of that has come from the fact that we did, I guess about 2 years ago, a TOD, a transit-oriented development industry forum, where we invited developers in. I think you folks were there at that forum at the Prime Osborne Convention Center, where we invited folks in, and we kind of showed you a pro forma, and we did a lot of our own homework, where what was the zoning on the parcels, what were the walkability of those parcels, the suitability for development. And so we did a lot of that homework and made it available on our website, and at the JTAFLA.com website. You go to transit-oriented development or a real estate area, and you will be able to pull down the work that the JTA has already done around the parcels and stations that we currently have operating.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. So let's get to these user-generated questions and get you on your way, Nat. We really appreciate this. Eddie Harris has a question about, he says, great job with the autonomous cars coming to Jacksonville. Do you expect this to increase job opportunities in the area? And if so, do you already have some projections and some approximate numbers you can share?
Yeah, I don't have the projections on the job creation. However, we do have numbers related to jobs that are being developed in downtown Jacksonville. And so with the development that was occurring in downtown Jacksonville back in 2015, that's why we went ahead with retaining the Skyway, converting it, and going to the U2C program. And so the idea was to actually leverage the fact that there was going to be a great deal more downtown revitalization, both in residential and in office. And that drove us in terms of downtown, retaining the Skyway and making the investments we're making, along with what the Jaguars are actually doing in and around the stadium. I don't have the number projections in terms of jobs we will be creating with our construction. Well, I may have some. I believe with the construction just on that first phase, we're somewhere in the range of about 60 to 70 jobs that are created in the first phase, recognizing that it's not a lot of construction. It's mostly on the tech side in terms of these vehicles. going into the aerial structure being converted from a monorail to a roadway, back to a roadway, there's a significant number of jobs in that project.
Sure. And then down the line, it's going to be that industry of autonomous driving vehicles
And
creating
that's
jobs.
we see. So the interesting thing, we are hoping, as through this RFQ RFP process, that the vehicle manufacturers will be building and doing their final assembly of vehicles here in Jacksonville. And so you can expect that to be something that we would consider very heavily in terms of who we select, and recognizing this project has the potential to be a catalyst for a niche industry that is supported by Jacksonville and Northeast Florida for other parts of the country. So that U2C project is not just Jacksonville centric. There are peer systems we're talking to right now that are similarly looking at autonomous vehicle programs. They're not as far down the line as we are for new systems, as well as aging infrastructure or older transit systems. This may be a solution to replacing existing infrastructure that may be, in the case of 50 to 60 years of age, and they're trying to determine what's the best, more flexible use of transit infrastructure in their communities.
Man, that's outstanding. Nat, thank you so much for spending time with us. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. This has really been a privilege for us, and for our audience that's here. Stick around. Greg and I are going to decompress and break down some of these topics. But I just want to thank you for spending time with us, and I'll let Greg, kind of have a last word there.
Nat, always just a pleasure. The amount of times we've spent time together, I walk away with new nuggets that you share every single time. And I just think it is so fun to be talking with a leader in your capacity who is so influential and is so excited about where things are right now and where they're going in the future. I mean, I just think we're so blessed to have you as a dynamic leader. I'm certainly excited to watch what you do and what your organization does, and to do our part to help downtown revitalize as well. We're just excited to be a part of what you're creating, my friend.
No problem. Just go to jtafla.com, real estate U2C project. We have the pages there, and it'll give you a great deal more information than I was able to share in this short time frame. But thank you for having me. And as you can see, I love talking about what we're doing here. I feel like I've got the greatest team in the world, and they're doing some fantastic things for the future of Jacksonville.
You're officially invited anytime you want to talk about it, Nat. This is fascinating. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Thanks,
All
Take
right.
care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And to our guests here today, I know Greg's not going to say it, but I'm going to say it. All this stuff is property appreciation talk, right? Like more jobs, technology, leading the industry. And I know that this was a little bit different today, and I got a little bit flustered. I didn't do my usual intro because we have very little time with Nat themselves and want to get as much value as possible. But if you're here to learn about rental property investing, go to jwbwebclass.com, and you're going to get the primer from JWB of how it all works. And if you have rental property investing questions that you want specifically answered, go to chatwithjwb.com. But in the meantime, we're here. Type it in the chat, type it in the Q&A. If you have any rental property investing questions, we can answer it with Gregg on right now. We're going to be on here another like 5 minutes at least, unless there's more questions. But Gregg, when you are this conversation, right, lived up to expectations, I would say, based on how much we were geeking out this morning.
It's so fun to talk to him. I mean, and as the CEO of the Transportation Authority, as a real estate investor, somebody especially who may not be from Jacksonville, you're not expecting that organization to be such a driver of growth, right? But it is. It absolutely is. I mean, that project that Nat is talking about, the U2C, is the only project of its kind in the U.S. right now. He is farther along with that project than any other project in any other city in the country. I mean, how do you make that happen? I mean, that's a dynamic leader. We're so happy to have him. And I just feel like it is under-realized as to how big of an impact this is having in the next 3 years, right? I mean, this is a huge, huge thing for Jacksonville.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. And like right now when he's talking, he is talking about just construction jobs of getting all this done, right? That's a ton of jobs. And then everything that's going to fall out, like everything that trickles around there, right? Like bringing in a manufacturing plant to, a car dealership, right? I recently learned that Bacardi has their only North American bottling plant is here in Jacksonville, right? So So there is this manufacturing sector that is not doing well everywhere else. And to think that you're going to get more manufacturing jobs that feed into more blue collar jobs and support the JWB ecosystem of who you house, I just think it's incredible, man.
You know, great leaders create a flywheel, and then that positive momentum is what drives, right? They can't do it all themselves. They create the flywheel. And hopefully everybody who's on the call here today could see the flywheel that Nat started to create years ago, right? It was about, we had a bus system that was not connected to all of our surrounding communities and didn't have a central location. So that was his first part of it, and said, okay, well, we got to get people that are all in this central location. So that's that Jacksonville Regional Transportation Center. And we've got that now. And then it's about, how do we connect that to make every part of downtown and the surrounding areas available to experience intermodal communication? That was the next part of the flywheel. The autonomous vehicles is a big part of that. Of course, he's doing that at the same time as connecting it, which is incredible. And then what you were talking about is that flywheel that then brings new and better jobs to Jacksonville, brings new and better companies. I know the last time that we were interviewing Nat, he talked about those companies who had inquired about the request for proposal, or I can't remember the previous step, but it was some of the biggest names. It was Facebook, it was some of these companies. And so we're getting some of that business to come to us by way of this project. And then it's the leaders of tomorrow want to be here because we are a leader in autonomous vehicles here. And then the new thing that I learned, that you and I just both learned, is the types of industries that will then locate here because we are that driver. It's this flywheel that Nat is creating that Jacksonville overall is going to benefit from. And we as real estate investors are going to benefit from long term.
Totally. And John, Eddie, I'm going to ask your questions right now, but to put a button on that whole flywheel effect and how JWB speaks of that concept, I heard a lot of JTA's experience with COVID and JWB's experience with COVID, right? The fact that y'all had already invested in the technology to remote work, you had built in these systems, forward-thinking leaders at JWB allowed for operations to continue without a hitch, right? The same as JTA having the same forward-thinking flywheel system that sets other things in motion was able to respond and be resilient in an unprecedented crisis, right? So I thought that was really interesting as well.
You know, and he's got a lot of challenges that they're not easy solutions for when this hit, right? But imagine if they didn't have those shields in place, right? You've got to be able to move people. The city can't completely shut down. He said that the city was still running bus routes even through the heart of the COVID crisis. So some of the decisions that he made, he didn't even know how important those were going to be, right? But he's been able to make sure that the bus is moving forward, right? That he's continuing to move forward while also being transparent about some of the challenges. I thought that was really cool. I mean, what type of leadership do you get and in the government level where you get pure excitement, pure passion, transparency? I mean, we need more leaders like that.
Yeah, that was awesome. So quick couple of questions here. Lee, I'm going to apologize. I didn't ask him the question about communicating with other transportation authorities. The conversation moved so quickly that we kind of had moved on from that, man, buddy. But thank you so much for having that question in there. Eddie Harris asks, does this change any areas where JWB manages properties zip code wise?
Thanks for the question, Eddie. It does not. The great thing is that we already invest in those neighborhoods where Nat was talking about transit-oriented development, right? And we are also very big on downtown Jacksonville. Now, you will not see turnkey rental properties from JWB in downtown Jacksonville right now because it doesn't meet our criteria. There are rougher pockets in downtown Jacksonville than we want to be at, and it doesn't hit our criteria today. But the reason that we are so big on downtown Jacksonville is because that's changing over time. And when downtown Jacksonville continues to thrive, continues to grow, continues to bring more residents downtown, all of our surrounding communities, the north side, the west side, south side, Arlington, the four major neighborhoods where JWB invests and where we put our clients, all of those neighborhoods benefit, especially if you have a project like the Ultimate Urban Circulator, the U2C, this autonomous vehicle project. I would highly recommend you go to that link that Pablo put in the chat box. Go watch this 2 or 3 minute video on the Ultimate Urban Circulator. It's going to take you to these neighborhoods that we are already investing in as well. So no need to change. It further is it's another reason why these neighborhoods have been strong in the past, are going to continue to be strong as investments in the future.
Great, great. Another forward-thinking thing that you guys are ahead of the game and ready to respond to. Fantastic. John Niklagi asks, what are some key factors in managing your first rental property?
Well, I'm going to assume that you are going to have this managed for you. I'm going to assume you're managing the property manager, right? This is more about how to create a passive real estate investment. If we were going to talk about how to manage your own property yourself, we'd need a lot more time than this, and there'd be a whole lot more work. So I'm going to assume that it's more of the how to manage your property manager route. Your property manager decision is incredibly important. And what I find is investors usually skim over it. They spend a lot of time on what market I should be investing in and what property I should be investing in. And they just assume that hiring a property manager is like, I can just Google somebody, I can find 10 property managers, I can pick one. They think of it almost like a commodity. What I would urge you to do is to think about your interviews and your decision for your property manager very similar to how you think about hiring a financial professional, your CPA, your lawyer. If you're going to be building a portfolio of rental properties and holding on for a long period of time, and you want this to be a significant part of your wealth, your property manager is that important to you. But most people don't realize this. But there's a very big difference between property managers who can think in terms of producing a rate of return for you versus property managers who just want to keep your house rented. You need to find people who know what it feels like to have properties rented a very long time and know what it feels like to have properties rented with lots of turnover in a very short period of times. At some point in their career, they need to have felt that pain of making mortgage payments when the rent is not coming in, right? They need to have felt that pain of what it costs to put money back into properties when they get turned over because your tenant left, so that they have systems and processes and talent to make sure that that doesn't happen. And I find that you only know that if you owned properties yourself, right? So when you're talking and interviewing property managers, I think that's a really important question to ask. Do you own properties yourself, right? And then another question to ask is, tell me how your actions, your staff, how your systems contribute to long-term tenant stays and how you make more money when my tenant stays longer. What you'll find is that most property management companies make more money when your tenant stays shorter. So that property management company that you're thinking about hiring needs to have a good answer for that. And then just simply, a lot of people don't put enough credence into the fact that you actually have to enjoy your conversations with the property manager, right? This is somebody, I always think about it like this, right? We all have people that call us on our phone, right? If somebody calls me and I pick up my phone and I see who it is and I'm smiling, that's a good sign, right? I want to talk to that person. If Pablo calls me, I'm smiling, I'm picking it up, I'm talking to him. Then we also have these people that call us, we look at our phone and we go click and we put it down. If in your conversation with your property manager, you're finding yourself more of a penchant to do that than to pick up the phone, that's because they're not funded to be around. They don't have great customer service skills. They're not making this enjoyable for you. They're not prepared. They're not thinking of solutions to problems before they come to you, right? These are really, really important in making the right decision for a property manager. So hopefully that's a few nuggets to help you on your journey there. But I think it's a crucial decision, and make sure you spend the right amount of time making the right choice.
I'm going to put you on the spot here, Gregg, because John is happy to get this response, but he was also asking for it to manage himself. So I'm going to ask you, what do you do? What does your property management company do that ensures long-term rental and keeping people in place? What were the things that you just told me that you have to ask?
So if John's interviewing me,
yes.
What do I do? What do we do at JWB to make sure that happens? Well,
yes.
So the first thing to understand is how a property management company makes money. Okay. Most property management companies make money. 25 to 50% of their revenues actually come from tenant placement fees. And the reason this is important to understand is because this is a driving factor as to why most property management companies are only going to sign 1-year leases. But John, the number one way you're going to succeed in owning rental properties is having long-term tenant stays. Your tenants need to be staying multiple years. for this to be successful for you and for you to enjoy it, right? So that should put up a red flag in your mind, right? Most property management companies or most investors themselves, when they're renting out their property, right, they only sign 1-year leases. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If you need to have people stay 3 years, 4 years plus to make this work and to really get the best long-term returns, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to sign 1-year leases. So what would I do? What do I do with my own rental properties? What would I advise you to do if you're managing them yourselves? Sign long-term leases. You're going to have to spend a lot more time and energy finding the tenant. But that is good time and energy to spend on the front end to make sure somebody is there for the long haul. And our portfolio, our average tenant stays over 4 years. And that's what you need. So sign long-term leases. We only sign 2 and 3 year leases. You can do that too. And focus on re-signs. We re-sign 70% of our residents to another renewal, either another 1, 2, or 3 year renewal. If you can sign 2 and 3 year leases and you can renew 70% of those people, you're going to wind up with tenant stays over 3 years, over 4 years. And that's the best advice I could give you to do that.
There you go. Gregg, it's been another amazing call, my friend. From this morning's run through today, it's been kind of like an ongoing conversation of autonomous cars, awesome future of Jacksonville. Like, I'm just super jacked up. I think you just told everybody on Facebook Live I'm your best friend. That's really cool. So this has been an amazing experience today. I want to encourage anybody that joined us today, if you want to know a little bit more about rental property investing, go to jwbwebclass.com and watch the video where Gregg breaks it all down at a really high level. If you want to take the next step, if you have a specific question about how it fits into your portfolio, go to chatwithjwb.com, set up an appointment, super easy, value add call. You're going to enjoy it. And I hope to see you all on Tuesday at the next Not Your Average Investor Show, where we're going to bring on a longtime client of JWB's, Rich Ritchie. That's really his name. You may recognize that last name because we had his wife on in one of the early shows. But the Richies have gone for a really long time being these passive they've been investing in the private investing program, had one property, and have recently decided to invest in a bunch more properties. And we're going to break down that decision-making process from the customer standpoint of, man, you've been a customer for a really long time. You've seen all this. Why now? Is it COVID? Is it that your kids are getting older? Like, what's going on and why is it working for you? I think it's going to be a really valuable conversation to have and really good questions and answers that you can ask Gregg and you can ask Rich. You don't want to ask me anything, right? I'm just a speaker box here, but I'm happy to answer that too. So I hope that everybody joins us on Tuesday. And in the meantime, join us in the Facebook group, jwbfacebookgroup.com. And we hope to see you every week. Gregg, I leave it here for you to wrap it up here, my friend.
Great call. What an honor today. And really excited about next Tuesday's show. I am excited. I have heard that both Pablo and Rich are rappers, by the way. And so I'm expecting big things for next Tuesday's show. I'm just going to leave it at that. Get your rapping skills going, Pablo. Don't sell yourself short there, brother.
All right. Time to wrap it up. See you all next week.